we are carrying on our series of Standing in the Rubble, where we are exploring what it looks like to navigate this new landscape, all the way our society looks. How do we navigate this? How do we understand who it is that God's calling us to be? And we're particularly focusing through the month of August on the spiritual disciplines. And this morning, we're looking at worship and gratitude as a discipline. So I would surprise you to know that I'm joined by Joe Hardy, worship leader extraordinaire, songwriter. So welcome, Joe. Great to have you with us. So I don't want you to define worship for me, but people might not think of worship as a discipline. So how, can you talk about that a little bit? What does it look like for worship to be a discipline? And how does it form us spiritually?
Yeah, I think the issue with the word discipline is it feels like something you're enforced, or you know. Yeah. We're exploring discipline with Joshy at the minute as a 2-year-old.
So think about, don't think about maybe that way, but maybe think about discipline as training ourselves, or training ourselves, disciplining ourselves to practice, to develop a habit, to form habits within us, which is also something you're probably wrestling with Joshy about too. So
yeah, absolutely, and I think obviously our first experience and understanding of worship corporately is coming. Well, we used to come here and sing together, and that whole act was about us taking our focus off of ourselves in that moment, interrupting the preoccupation with ourselves. That's a line from Eugene Peterson, to attend to the presence of God, and actually the discipline of I'm stopping, I'm being fully present in this moment, I'm not on my phone, I'm not thinking about the roast necessarily, and actually I'm attending to the presence of God here. That's what we do with corporately gathering. Yeah,
choosing to look up.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think worship is probably the most present I ever am in my life, and even thinking about parenting and other times, I actually think worship is the time where I'm most grounded, most in the moment, most present, because I'm not focused on the other things. Actually, I'm entirely attending to the presence of God. So I guess that's the discipline part. There is the allowing myself to be interrupted and to interrupt all those other things, and that makes sense in our corporate gathering and when we come together and sing. I think the discipline part, and maybe the part that we don't always talk about so much, is how we form that kind of rhythm and routine and pattern at home and on our own.
Yeah, okay. So, you're just talking there about, this is the time when you go beyond the preoccupation with self, and which I really like that phrase. But, actually probably as with all disciplines, but certainly with worship, it can be quite easy to make worship quite indulgent. This act which is supposed to be about us looking up, encountering Jesus, encountering God face to face, being entirely present in his presence, and beyond ourselves. We can actually become quite indulgent, self-indulgent in worship, can't we? Quite self-preoccupied, quite. So how do we avoid that?
That's a great question. I think, for a long time, you and I have talked about worship being a response to the revelation of God. Right. And I think when God is revealed, the way that we are naturally wired as humans is to respond. If you look through history, the way that happened in the Old Testament is they would build an altar, they would offer sacrifices. There was God has been revealed, we have to do something because he's... Yeah,
God was here and I never knew it. Yeah. As Joshua built God was here all the time and I had no idea it was his was his altar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think how we're wired and built is that we're designed to respond to the revelation of God. I think what happens is we're not always in tune to those revelations, or to see God, see God do something new and responding to that. Or, and maybe worse, we respond and make the focus ourselves, as opposed to focusing on what God's done. So, a significant moment where God does something beautiful, and actually, instead of simply giving him the glory, gratitude, like we started there, and thanking God for who he is, thanking him for what he's done, actually we can view it through our own lens, through our own filter, make it all about us in that moment.
Yeah. So gratitude might be one of those ways, might it? Because that's where we project back onto God and go, thank you, like the gratitude for all the blessings that you pour out on me, giving thanks to God for all the ways that he has loved us, been with us, and blessed us, and saved us, and healed us, and restored us, and renewed us. And so that, I guess, gratitude. So, I mean, is gratitude something that is that a regular practice in your worship? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very often how I open a corporate time of worship anyway.
Right.
Psalm 100 is enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. And actually, I think simply coming into God's presence with thankful heart, or with an attitude of gratitude, actually shifts it off of myself and simply says, God, thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you've done. I think my mum has always instilled gratitude into us.
Always got to write a letter.
Always, as a family. Every year at Christmas, we would write a list of 100 things we were thankful for as a family. And I think probably because she used to read Pollyanna to us as boys, that was probably part of that. But it's been something that, whether spiritually or physically, has been wired into me. So I do find that gratitude is something that is very natural. And when God does something, actually, I do find a natural response. It's gratitude. I was thinking a bit about a kind of a recent story, a recent situation of how I've been exploring this at home, because lockdown's been really interesting time.
Tough time.
Really tough time. Raising a toddler and a few-month-old baby through home. It's not been a massively disciplined time. It's not been a massively. We've had routine, but it's been very much.
You've had rhythms.
We've had rhythm, but it's been very much focused around our boys, and so actually my response to the revelation of God has been much more stolen moments and much more kind of aware. And I was thinking the other day, there was a point where Freddie was just screaming, and he's got some lungs on him. And I couldn't settle him. I was rocking him, walking, moving around the room, and, trying different body positions to help with his reflux and all sorts of things. And in that moment, there was just this revelation of God kind of showing me, like, that's how he holds me, and that's how he looks at me. And so in my deep hurt, anguish, or however I'm feeling, actually, he's there as the Father, holding me, comforting me. And so there was just suddenly this, like, oh my goodness, this, the total perspective change. Instead of like, please stop crying, to please stop crying, but also aware that, like, almost peace and God, thank you that this is the love that you have for me. So it wasn't this profound singing moment. It wasn't this beautiful, hour-long time of intimacy. Actually, it was a stolen moment of focusing and saying, God, I thank you that this is how you see me. I thank you this is how you love me.
But then worship as a response there, which is a beautiful way of talking about it, is something you've taught yourself to be instinctive, right?
Yeah.
That is, we don't all, I don't think, instinctively recognise when I go, oh, thank you,
Yeah.
Lord, because look, my
Look at my screaming baby, how wonderful is this moment?
What
Yeah.
an incredible revelation of your love. Like, we don't all
No,
respond
okay.
to those moments like that,
Yeah.
and I don't think you always respond to
No,
those
not
moments like that. And but it's that when you have that revelation, I think, how have you taught yourself to channel that response into worship?
I think the thing, worship is an action. It's not a passive thing. In the same way that, love's a verb, and it's a nice little saying there. But love's an action. To love your wife is not to just coexist in the same house. Actually, that probably will cause more upset and frustration. And actually, to love your wife or to love your family, love is an action of
Acts of love, acts of service, acts of
exactly.
generosity, acts of...
Yeah, and it's something that you might not consciously think or do, but it's something that you actively do. And I think the thing that I've had to learn over years of practicing this is that worship is an action. Worship is not you don't walk into think of it in a corporate setting, you don't walk into a room and get hit by the presence every time. It does happen, but you don't walk into a room, get hit by the presence, and suddenly you're drawn up into the heavenly realms, and that's a worshipful moment. Actually, to come and worship God is an action of interrupting the preoccupation with myself and all the other stuff around it, actively going, God, I'm going to give you my thanks, my praise, my worship in this moment. The Greek word that's used so often is proskuneo, which is effectively translated as to kiss the hand. So like coming into the presence of a king, you would then actively go to the king, kiss the hand, bow down, and give the king the present, the worth,
the offering,
whatever. Yeah, exactly. And so that's so often the word that Paul particularly uses when we worship, and it's an action of coming into God's presence and coming and kissing the hand, coming and going, here I am, you are the king, you are worthy.
And the same as it is in marriage, when we talk about acts of love and kindness, acts of submission.
Yeah.
It's worship is an act of submission to God. It's an act of surrender. It's an act of praise and gratitude and whatever. It's also this act of surrender. Your will, not mine.
Yeah.
Your your way, not my way.
Yeah.
Your reality, not my reality. Like your truth, not my truth. Like it's this act of submission, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think the discipline part there is practicing that. Is practicing coming into God's presence and submitting, surrendering. And so that can mean coming into a room full of people on a Sunday morning and you're an introvert and you don't want to be there, and going, actually, no, you know what, this is being community, this is me, God, I'm coming to worship you and I want to be here with these people. And it can also mean actively choosing to give God the glory when you're going through the worst suffering,
right,
and the worst pain. And through this season people have been lamenting and suffering and losing loved ones, and actually choosing to still give God your love and your adoration in the midst of that.
And lament is a less talked about aspect of worship, right? But the psalmist, I don't know how many of the psalms involve lament, but it's a significant percentage.
A lot, yeah.
And in my head it's around 40%. So I don't know if that's true. I'm plucking that from somewhere.
Let's go with it, yeah.
But it's around there. Lament is prominent in the Psalms, and yet not so prominent. We kind of come in and go, oh, sing that song because I love that song and it makes me feel, and that makes me feel great, or it makes me feel really close, whatever it might be. But actually, lament, and particularly in these days, particularly in these times, lament is a beautiful part of worship.
Yeah.
Right. So and I think it takes courage, doesn't it, to be honest with God when you're, but this is hurting.
Yeah.
But this is, I'm really, really sad about this, or I'm really angry about this, or that in our worship, we don't always, gratitude is a great habit to start with, but we don't always have to be happy or thankful. Worship can involve all our emotions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think using the image there of, love in a marriage and or in a relationship, actually, if all you ever project is the okay, and you don't let the person know what's really going on within you, you only get a limited expression of that love, don't you? You the best moments often are the times where you've had to face the really hard things together, and you've had to be really raw and honest and vulnerable. And I think I don't know where it comes from. I don't know exactly the journey that it's been on. I think we have got a problem in our society where we have to be okay, and we have to project something that is okay. It exists all through social media, and I think unfortunately that is then reflected in how we gather, because also it's hard in a corporate setting, because some people are celebrating because they've just got promotion, or they found out they're pregnant, or some people are mourning because they've just lost somebody, and so it's hard to come into a space and go, right, let's all just sit in this emotion.
But there is something beautiful, isn't there, about, well, wherever we are, whatever's going on, whether we're filled with joy or sorrow, whether we're filled with passion to act and to change the world, or anger because I feel so disempowered in the world, or whatever it might be. I guess the act of worship, and tell me where I'm wrong here, because well, you're sat there and I'm sat here. The act of worship is choosing to look beyond ourselves, but bringing those emotions, bringing that reality, but surrendering it, submitting it to God, looking up even in those, and being honest with those challenges, with those emotions, with that reality, but just go, but even in the midst, I will cry out to you. Even in the midst, I will worship you. Even in the midst, I will bring this thing to you. And that, I guess, that's the act of worship, right?
Yeah, and I think if we think of this as the discipline of worship, actually the discipline is coming into God's presence wherever I'm at.
Right.
And meeting with him in that place. Not just, I'm feeling pretty good today, maybe I'll do some singing. That limits.
I'll put my favourite worship CD on.
Absolutely.
Which is great. There's nothing wrong with putting your favourite worship. It helps us come into the presence. It's just if that's all we ever do.
Yeah, I think it's a limited expression of love. And I think one of the practices that I've discovered recently that has been about allowing God to be fully in those moments, and this doesn't matter whether you're in a great place or a bad place, is reflecting on we have a rhythm to us all, in that we breathe in and breathe out all day, every day. So we have a rhythm, and sometimes that's fast and slow, but actually we can bring God into our rhythm of breathing. And so this was something Brian Dirksen was talking about, and he talked about prayer breath, and he literally was talking about breathing in and out the word Abba. So it was like, so that our breath becomes a prayer and an expression. And I think that actually that's simple, because we're just saying Abba, Father. And if we're in a position of lament and pain, and we don't have the words to express what we're saying, actually we can still acknowledge that he is Father. In that same way that I was holding Freddie screaming, and I reminded that he is Father. Actually, in my pain, I can pray, Abba. He is Father. In my joy, in my celebration, I can declare, Abba, he is Father, he is with me. And that's been a really helpful practice to do recently.
Love it.
Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much. Beautiful, profound, fabulous. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.